Hello, this is my coding project for Year 10, Unit 1. It's on Toronto housing prices and the role of household finances. My final project is in the form of a presentation, and it begins with brief information on the background of the topic, and it later diverges into separate sections based on the variables being shown. So first, it displays housing prices in various forms, including percentage changes over time. Next, the same occurs with household income, which is shown as nominal household net income, and later with percentage changes. Then household debt is shown cumulatively using a bar graph, and later using a stacked bar graph to demonstrate the different subtypes of debt. And then also has percentage changes graphs and a heat map. Household debt to income, also known as household DTI, is shown using a line graph, and then later with a waterfall chart for its percentage changes. Housing prices as a percentage of household net income is demonstrated using a line graph, and the same occurs with mortgage debt as a percentage of housing prices. And finally, there are comparisons between all the different variables which help illustrate relationships. And at the end of each comparison is an additional slide with a written component helping elaborate the relationship. The first one is between housing prices and household net income. And then there is also the same relationship but with percentage changes. And then an explanation. The same occurs with household net income, household total debt and household and housing prices, where they are shown nominally, and then also with percentage changes. And then in the case of household DTI, it has to be shown using a dual axis chart because it's represented in percent, and housing prices is represented using Canadian dollars. But the percentage changes graph is the same. And then housing prices compared to housing prices as a percentage of household income is also demonstrated using a dual axis chart, and then but doesn't contain a percentage changes graph because one of the values is already represented in percent. And lastly, housing prices are compared to mortgage debt as a percentage of housing prices, again using a dual axis chart and without an additional chart with percentage changes. And the last visualization is a trivariable comparison between household total debt, household net income, and housing prices, which is represented through the size of the different bubbles. And it's in the form of a bubble chart. And lastly, at the end of the presentation, there's an additional slide for the raw data sources as well as the files on Google Drive. Now I will explain the code of the program. So the project is divided into several different files, including 4 CSV files, a Python IPYNB file, and here are all the different visualizations that are saved once the file is ran. So I will explain how it works. So it's divided into sections as a typical Jupyter Notebook file, and it first starts off with an explanation and just a general background for what the file contains. And then it has its first section, module imports, in which of course, all the different modules are imported that are required to be used in the program. Next, helper functions are defined, which are referenced throughout other loops and also when creating visualizations. There are quite a few of these, and they save a lot of time in the actual bulk of the code. Afterwards, the main section, which is data processing, occurs. And first, the lists are loaded. The CSV files are loaded as lists. Then their different columns are defined. And then for a series of loops, data is processed into lists, which is also printed. This occurs for all the different values that are used in the visualizations. And afterwards, the last section is, of course, data visualization, which first there are universal parameters for all the visualizations that are specified. And then all the lists are turned into different types of data containers, depending on the visualization. So there's NumPy arrays and pandas data frames, and some of them include only some columns of the original list they came from of process data, or some of them include multiple columns. It depends on which visualization they're being used in. Afterwards, scales are declared, since all the different visualizations use different scales, or almost all of them. Then there are colors, and afterwards, each of the visualizations are programmed. They follow a general format to keep things simple, and the variables are also declared in a general format, not to mention throughout the file. And then each visualization is displayed as well as saved. And there are 25 visualizations of 7 different visualization types, and they each display relationships and individual variables as shown in the final product. So here are all the different visualizations. Now I will explain whether or not the project achieved its different success criteria. So first, my project should have had an effective format to properly deliver its findings, which I believe as a presentation, it's rather effective, especially for more concise viewing. Next, my website should have contained a series of visualizations of different types that serve purposes by displaying specific data, which I believe I certainly achieved that one, because I had several different visualizations of different types, and they each displayed different variables. Next, my program should have had a succinct and informative explanation, or a series of explanations, which I believe it did, because after every main relationship in the final product, and in the form of notes under each graph, there were the different relationships and trends were explained for the viewer. My project should also have considered multiple perspectives, which I believe when I wrote my explanations, I also tried to include different possible circumstances that could have occurred, and not usually just stuck to one conclusion. So I believe it was able to meet that criterion. Next, my project should also have considered and explained past irregularities and the data it uses, which I believe it did, since it mentioned the impacts of the Great Recession, as well as it included several different key components and some of the first graphs for vertical lines that were annotated to explain what they were. Next, my project should have communicated the GTA relationships between household income and real estate prices, household debt and real estate prices, and household debt to income ratios and real estate prices, which all of which were explained and in different formats. So that was succeeded as well. Next, the project should have referenced figures from its data and its explanations. I think I probably could have done a better job achieving this success criteria, because there were not many direct figures in the final project or final product. Although there were occasional references, it probably could have been increased. Next, the program should have contained complete citations with the sources and specific data sets for all the charts in the form of a bibliography, which my final product contained all of those, along with the download for the program. So it certainly achieved that. Next, it should have displayed all raw data and offered multiple download options. Unfortunately, I did not find a way to display raw data, since many of the CSV files were hundreds of thousands of lines. So I had to omit that, but I did offer a download option, which was actually a link to a folder, which in itself has several download options. So I would say that was partially achieved. Well, thank you very much for listening to my video explanation, and goodbye.